All right, Zig coming in at the top. Today on the show, we have Brenda Sauter, bass player to the band The Feelies and singer-songwriter in Wild Carnation, as well as bass player in Speed the Plough and the Trypes. If for some reason you are unaware of any of those bands, do yourself a favor and dive in. Definitely The Feelies is a great start, and Wild Carnation is a great second. And definitely don't pass up on the Trypes. Getting ready to talk with Brenda, I realized, because I talked with the Trypes when they did their re-release. And the scene that all these bands came from was so immersive with each other, it's really hard to follow a narrative of a through line. I talked with John and Tony Baumgartner of the Trypes probably about a year ago. And if you want more context on this story from a different point of view, definitely check out my interview with the Trypes. But because Brenda started with them before she got into the Feelies. And it's such an interesting narrative because so many bands come from scenes, but not so many scenes are the bands in a way. Like all the Feelies members and Trypes members were mingling together in other projects like the Willies. But I digress. We're here to talk about Wild Carnation. This is what Brenda did after the Feelies. Delmore Recording Society is releasing a re-release of Tricycle, Wild Carnation's first record, April 22nd, Record Store Day. You can get a rad Record Store Day version and on all streaming platforms. The re-release features a live concert from Germany, 1997, as well as all the original demos. And there's some rad covers in that live concert. If you have yet to hear Tricycle, it's an incredible record. So to get the insights and get the live insights of how this band worked is really cool. We're going to listen to a track. This is Rising Tide, the first track off the record. Wild Carnation's Tricycle, Rising Tide. Dig it. Wild Carnation, Rising Tides is the tune. Tricycle's the record, available now. Re-release, definitely don't pass on it. A lot of cool stuff packed within it. And our conversation was pre-packed. Brenda's got a dense history, especially with how much the Feelies did. So we're going to get right into this. But before we do, if you guys can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast and any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking with cool guests like Brenda and sharing their insights with you. So without further ado, here's our conversation. To start off, I guess, how was the gig? You guys were in Boston yesterday?
Yeah, so that was the Feelies doing 2 shows in Massachusetts. Last night was Amherst, and the night before was Cambridge. So, yeah, really good, really wonderful audiences. Both shows were sold out, so it was really nice to come to a gig like that, knowing that, people were really anticipating and there were just so many people there. Makes you feel good.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing we're chasing is that the big shows like that when they all pan out and everyone's into it. Was it just you guys, or did you guys have support?
It's just us. Since 2008, most of our shows are an evening with. So we do a set, take a break, and then do a second set. There are exceptions like when we do a festival. We've done Pitchfork. We've done the Wilco one. I'm blanking. It was in 2019.
That either way, that's
yeah,
that's cool. I watched a documentary on the band Morphine. And they were one of the first bands that were like, to my perspective, they were like, we don't do any support acts. They were like, we headline everything we do, and like that's how we're gonna present ourselves. And I was like,
right,
because sorry,
yeah. Well, one of the reasons is you have a lot of material, and how are you going to present it all, or as much as you like if you're limited to one set. I get the festival thing, which, so the Wilco Festival is the Solid Sound Festival.
Ah, we got it.
And it typically happens every other year. But yeah, so if you're only able to do an hour, we call it like a festival set where you kind of take your greatest hits and play those. But an evening with allows you to expand more. And the sets typically start out quieter and just build in intensity and volume. So the sonic thing just kind of gradually builds. And earlier on, the first set would typically be quiet, not quiet, but like less intense songs. And then the second set would be the more intense, faster songs. But then over the years, it's changed so that each set builds up. So we start with Here Before, which is a quiet song. And then by the end of the first set, it's Loveless Love, which is a pretty intense song. And then the second set will start a little bit louder than the first set. And then it builds up to Raised Eyebrows and Crazy Rhythms. So there's sort of a formula to it. You don't, although it does work to give the ears a break to build up and then maybe quiet down. But in general, the frenzy kind of builds throughout the set.
Because I noticed that going through like the Feelies records is there's that same kind of like dynamic. I would call it like a musical dynamic kind of roller coaster of waves like that. So like,
Right.
and with all the records you guys have now, to like fashion a show like that, I think that's like the best kind of way to encompass the whole thing.
Hmm.
Did
Yeah. Yeah.
um was the Peanut Gallery, the music showcase, was that your first Feelies gig? I think it was
That
82,
was
83.
that was actually my first Trypes gig. So
Oh,
before I
okay.
was a Feely, I was in the Trypes. I met the whole Heldon family through a friend. I was going to art school and uh, met a woman named Nicole, and she was the one who actually turned me on to the Feelies, the Trypes, the whole Heldon scene. Um, and so it's kind of a long story, but I did have the opportunity to sit in with them at the Peanut Gallery with the Trypes, and and just obviously loved it. And so I would go see them. I would bring friends sometimes and go see the Trypes whenever they played. And also saw, well, the Phillies weren't playing that much that year. And I don't want to give the wrong history, but there were sporadic shows in the early 80s as far as the Feelies, and that was before my time with them. So yeah, so I played. I had the opportunity to play with the Trypes at the Peanut Gallery, and then after still following them, seeing shows, I just worked up the courage to ask John Baumgartner, the songwriter of the group, if they ever wanted a permanent bass player, I'd love to play, and that was all I said. Um, and then a couple months later, I got a phone call that they were um, that would I want to join. So at that point, the Tripes, um, there when I joined, there was a change in the personnel. So I remember going to the first rehearsal as a tripe, and Bill Million was on percussion, and Stan Demesky was on drums. And the last time I'd seen the group, Glenn Mercer was on drums. They had a lead singer, El Bruce, Mark Francie on guitar, John Baumgartner on keyboards, and Tony Baumgartner playing flute and doing some vocals. So it was mainly a lead singer, El Bruce. He was the main singer. So when I arrived, I was kind of wondering, well, where's El Bruce, and who's this guy on the drums? Not
Yeah.
it was the first time I had met Stan. because again, when I went to see the Trypes, it was a different lineup, and now I realized, oh, okay, this is a new lineup.
Because trying to trace, like, I talked with John and Tony when they put out the Music for Our Neighbors remake or remaster, and
Hmm.
like the scene seems to meld together in a bunch of different projects in a really beautiful way, and like, so when were you going for music in art college, or was it a different medium?
No, it was just art.
Okay.
But music had always been there. Um, Actually, throughout my life, music and art have traded positions as far as a livelihood.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been kind of blessed to be able to do that. Uh, yeah, so music, I just obviously love music, and um, had been in some bands that were trying to get off the ground, and so that's when I found out about the Tripes and the whole Helden scene. And in fact, it was at Maxwell's. I believe it was 1981. Um, I do have some things written down. Uh, I don't have that written down here. I think it was 81. Went to see the Bongos and the Tripes at Maxwell's with this friend from art school, and that just changed my world. It literally changed my life, and I it was like I was introduced to a scene that I had never been I just never seen anything like this before. When I would go to clubs, it would be to watch basically cover bands and just learn from how they play. I'd watch the bass player and the drummer and just try to figure out what they were doing. If it worked well, if it didn't work well. And this was the first time of finding a scene where it was all original music. So it was really an eye-opening experience, and then I just fell in love with it. The sound and just the whole idea of wow, original music, in this really cool club.
Yeah. Well, and it's when I listen to all the bands that kind of come from, like, there's this freeness to the Feelies and to the Tripes and like Speed the Plough. There's like this the in coming from like the other scene in which it's all like kind of calculated and you're learning and you're judged on how well you execute a Led Zeppelin cover or whatever,
Hmm.
which is its
Right.
own feat, and that's its own art form. But
Yes.
to be able to dabble and make mistakes and learn and everything shift with it, like that's art, that's jazz, that's coming into like trying to find that thing, and that's so cool that like as you're going for art and trying to make the was it as you're going for art and trying to make the music work that you found the bubble in which that kind of like grows. Was it
Yeah.
always bass?
No.
No.
Well,
Okay.
going way back, it was some violin. I think violin was first. My aunt, she's retired now, but she was a music teacher, and so I remember going. Like one of my brothers and I would go for violin lessons. I'm guessing I was around 7, maybe, or maybe a little younger, somewhere around 6 or 7. And then, so I have 3 older brothers, and they all took accordion lessons. As they get old enough,
Yeah.
you went for accordion lessons. And accordions are so cool. I
They
know
are.
they get a bad rap, but they are amazing instruments and not easy to play. Um, so the 3 older brothers got accordion lessons, and I'm not sure why I went for piano. I don't recall if I said I want to learn piano, or back then maybe girls weren't supposed to play accordions. I don't know the backstory, but so I started taking piano lessons with the same teacher, and we did that for years. And then in 5th grade, um, my main teacher was giving guitar lessons. That she mentioned it in class, And I asked my parents, and they said yes. So I started taking guitar in fifth grade. And what I learned, I didn't learn lead guitar. It was basically chords and singing. So I learned Bob Dylan songs, Joan Baez, a lot of protest songs, like some that are pretty obscure. But that started me on the road to stringed instruments. And eighth grade graduation, I got a 12 string as a gift. So I was kind of infatuated with 12 strings, I guess. And then yeah, so and then was playing in groups in high school. You do talent shows. There was a Cousin Brucey. I mean, I know you're too young to know Cousin Brucey, but he was a famous radio DJ. So there'd be talent shows in the area, and then a group of us we'd practice and then go try out, and we ended up doing pretty well, like getting a prize or auditioning for a marathon. No, sorry, a telethon for a hospital and getting onto that, but going on at like 2 o'clock in the morning. So just kind of little gigs here and there. And then bass playing came out of necessity because I was in a group in New Jersey, not in Halden, a town not too far from there. And we had like 3 guitar players. I sometimes played keyboard. Once in a while, we'd have a drummer, no bass player. So it was just a lot of strumming. One of the guitar players played lead. And I just, I don't recall all the details, but I decided, well, maybe I'll just take up bass. And then I took lessons from a place that was right in my town. Took lessons for about 6 months, and then the teacher said, "Go find a band. Just go find a band." And so I did. And then, but actually, there was another group in the early '80s that formed, and actually, some of the people were from that art school. So you were talking about a bubble, and when you go to art school, you find a lot of musicians, and vice versa. If you were to go to a music school, you'd probably find a lot of people also do art.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Um,
I definitely agree. And like one, it's interesting. Like, well, I play 12 string in my band, so I understand that 12
okay.
string fascination. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and maybe coming from a piano, you're one string less of the 3 string strike. So maybe that's
Hmm.
that chorusy or that bigger, lusher sound. I don't know, but definitely bass players are always the most wanted, and that's interesting. That he's like,
Yeah,
okay, join the
it was a
band.
good choice.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Wow. So like, okay, so you're playing bass with this band, and then you jump into the and they were they doing like the kind of the covery stuff, or were they longing for the freeness?
It was a mixture. There
Okay.
wasn't quite the longing for the. There were a lot of, not to stereotype, but and I would assume it's sort of the same thing now.
Hmm.
Um, you start out doing covers because you're inspired by them. You enjoy playing them. You're playing the music that you maybe grew up with or that you're listening to. Um, and so you'd approach the band like, okay, we'll do covers, and then we'll do a couple originals. So it was a way of sneaking in your original. And like when I said I was going to see bands and kind of zoning in to the bass player and the drummer, so many bands did that. And I can just about every band you'd see, they play Springsteen, they um, do the popular covers at the time, and then they say, oh, now we're going to do an original. Um, so there were very few bands that I had seen that did only their own type of music. Um, but that band, so we had a few gigs, and but then the drummer realized, we're probably not going to go anywhere. Um, well, he kind of, I don't know. I think he left as I was starting to take up the bass. So he didn't even give it a chance really to see what happens if, okay, now we have drums and bass. And he was very talented. And good drummers are in demand. So he probably had many other offers. But when that band fizzled, then out of those ashes rose a band that what okay, yeah, we were still doing this new band did covers, but then we also did our own music. And then out of those ashes came a trio and then a duo, and it was all our own music. Right. I think as you start to mature, well, and this is not dissing any bands, any cover bands, because like you said, it is a talent to try to recreate something. But I think as you start to mature, you start to realize, I don't want to play just other people's music. And if I do other people's music, I want to do it. I want the freedom to interpret it, coming through my soul. So I think you reach a point, some people reach a point where they decide, it's got to be my own music or our own music.
I definitely agree with that. I recently read this quote by Kenny Warner, a pianist. Um, there's a cosmic bank account that it seems like musicians like Miles Davis and Monk have access to, and we're all drawing from that. And his
Mm-hmm.
his turn was, well, I want to open my own bank account and draw from that same source they're drawing from. And
Uh-huh.
because like there's so much beauty within learning someone else's and being able to express like that, but there's also the beauty in with finding your own. And
Yeah.
with John and Tony, they said like their music and just their character, they seem so welcoming and that like so eventually you're meeting up with them, you're playing with the Trypes. Are the Willies happening around that same time, or are the Willies just like because from what John and Tony were telling me, there was a lot of shows that they would have where they would just rearrange members and like
Yeah. Right. Right. The story is that they would do it so that no one would have to, there wouldn't have to be a big changeover in between bands.
right.
So now I don't know if that's just a kind of an in joke or whether that
Yeah.
was really the driving force, but yeah, so kind of I think it might have been Elbrus who said, well, why don't we just open for ourselves? And that's how Young Woo came to be. So it was Young Woo opening for, I believe it would have been the Trypes, and I believe Elbrus saying, well, let's just call it Young Woo. That just came out of nowhere. So yeah, at one point, all the members would kind of flow in and out of these various bands. So the Willies predated my entrance into the
Okay.
Tribes,
Okay.
but then so a lot of energy and focus went into the Tribes. Like I said, there was this new lineup. So the other bands were kind of put on hold. Nothing breaks up, but and it's basically the same people and most of the same people anyway. Um, um, so the Willies were kind of on hold at that time, and the focus was on the Tripes, and then putting out the Explorers hold. And so my personal perspective was that I was now a Tripe, and then I was asked to join Young Woo and the Willies. Um, so actually backing up a little bit. So in 1983, the Feelies played sporadically with three drummers. So that would have been Anton Fear, Dave Weckerman, and Stan Demeski. Because Anton was kind of in and out, and Stan was a substitute for him. And then I believe, in all fairness, not to push Stan out just because Anton was there. So the plan was to have 3 drummers moving forward, but it was very sporadic. And then in August, so in 1983, the Trypes were recording Explorer's Hole. So again, the focus was on the Trypes, and the Feelies were not really. It was sporadic during that time.
And like from what I remember, that was the goal was to get get a single for the "Come On In" jukebox, right?
Oh, I'm not aware of that.
Okay,
Uh,
that's
uh,
what,
Maxwell's?
the Tony and
Mm.
I can't remember if it was John or Tony. They were saying one of the goals for the early recording was to get a single that they can put in a place called the "Come On In," um,
Okay.
which was
Wow.
around the Peanut Gallery. But
Okay. Wow.
but okay, so but that's cool that the like going out of the way to make it so every drummer had an outlet, so everyone could
Hmm.
play. And
Yeah.
so during this time when it's bouncing from one thing to the next and everyone's supporting each other, because the Feelies at that point, crazy rhythms was out, and they were trying to move on from that or figure out what to do, right? So were you
Yeah. And
okay?
then again, they would get involved with other projects. Like Bill and Glenn were doing soundtracks, just working in
Right,
um, and and they were actually working simultaneously at the time that Eno was doing exploring like that. So many people think that uh, that I'm trying to explain the like the electronic experimental music that was now coming up, that influenced Bill and Glenn, but actually they were kind of discovering it at the same time as other people were. Uh, so there were those side projects as well, which is so far removed from rock and roll or the Crazy Rhythms album.
right. Well, when you're dabbling to expand further, I mean, like, and that's already out there. I imagine you're going to find similar paths. Um, so like with this whole like
Yeah.
kind of training ground of jumping through all these bands and kind of coming from like a more like kind of structured, we're doing covers and trying to do originals. By the time like you guys, because by the time you get into the Feelies, was it kind of like, because that's got to be a little like intimidating in a way that like jumping all these acts that are freely like playing and just harping on a note, doing all this kind of experimental stuff. Like, was it easy? I guess my question is, was it easy to embrace that coming from a background of like learning songs and be like longing for that and being able to just to jump right in, or was that kind of a learning process being in all these different groups?
Yeah, that's a great question that I don't think I've ever really thought about. Um, yes, it was a challenge. For instance, well, let's just do a little backstory. So I joined Young Woo and the Willies, and then at one point, I remember Bill saying, "Well, we're thinking of making the Willies become the Feelies. What do you think about that?" And I said, "Sure." So in the Willies, I was pretty much playing my own parts. I don't know that I would have heard a tape of anything that was demoed or practice tapes or anything. So I was just coming up with my own thing, I believe. So now that we were becoming the Feelies, then there's that what you just mentioned, like, okay, now I've got to play somebody else's parts. And that's so having been in cover bands, all right, that training, I guess, helped with that. So in a way that's inspiring, learning somebody else's part. It's a challenge because how did Keith play it? Did he play it way up on the neck? Did he play it open strings? So I'm just kind of learning and I remember spending a bit of time just putting the Feelies record on and sitting cross-legged on the floor with my bass and figuring out the parts. So yeah, it can be intimidating following someone. But then there were the Willie songs were now becoming the Feely songs. So those were my parts. So it was a real blend between the skill of learning someone else's part and coming up with your own part.
Right.
So sometimes intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so then that change happens and you learn these parts, and then like when do you guys start writing Good Earth and the records that followed after? Like was it kind of immediate because of the experimenting and right playing with the Willies and the already kind of having some of those ideas? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. So the Willie's material now becomes the Feelies material, and some of the material uh, was being played by the Crazy Rhythms group. So the quartet, they had started playing a form of slipping. So those songs were starting to appear. Some of them before I joined, and then some were being formulated after I joined. So there's sort of a blend there of older songs, post Crazy Rhythms, but well before the Good Earth, and then some that were, coming out not too uh, not too far before the Good Earth.
And like one thing I read somewhere, or John told me, or it was from Tony, there like that there was some like recording like kind of guidelines with the Feelies. So like tracking like there's no symbols or something like it was. Is this a
Yeah,
true thing, or is this like a rumor thing?
I believe it's a true thing.
Yeah.
Um, so if you listen to Crazy Rhythms, there aren't a lot of symbols, or I believe sometimes they were done as an overdub. So basically, when you have a lot of cymbals, um, it's competing with the guitars. Just think of the
Yeah.
frequencies. Um, and so, I do kind of get that. So I guess you could say that the cymbals were discouraged.
Okay.
But when the Willies became the Feelies, and it was Stan and Dave, Bill, Glenn, and me. Um, there, I don't believe there was as much discussion about symbols as maybe there had been with Anton.
Okay.
So it's one of those rock and roll stories of Anton not being able or allowed to play the cymbals. I'm not really sure about
Okay.
that, but that is the rock legend that Bill and Glenn told Anton not to play the cymbals.
That's awesome.
So that you have to go to the source for that one, I think.
So
And yeah, and Anton unfortunately isn't with us
yeah.
on Earth anymore.
Um, so as like you're as you're in the Feelies, like are you like is this where your writing bug starts to kind of take hold? Like are you writing songs and riffs and bringing it to the group as like Good Earth and the next few records are coming out and you guys are playing more? Is that like or is it just kind of like a group process?
That that varied. For the Good Earth was very organic, so I would say that most of the song, like 99% of the parts, just happened. You just play together. Some songs would come out of jams. Some were a little more formed. Definitely a blend. But then there were some songs like "Slow Down." Glenn had a very particular bass part, and he just wanted one note, just droning on a note, and then at a very specific point, um, leave that note, go to another note, and then go back. So I remember, being in Mixolydian studio and um, going direct. It wasn't even through an amp for slow down, and then just like he'd point when it should go to the next note. So
Yeah.
so I get that. Like the vision was, it shouldn't be busy. The whole song should be kind of droning,
Right. Right.
and it builds almost like an airplane trying to take off. There's nothing that kind of pulls you away from this drone, this quarter, kind of a mild sonic boom.
Hmm. Well, that's like the serving the song type. That's the
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
narrative of that, and that's what a good bass player does, you know.
right.
And
Yeah, yeah. So
um,
there would be a song here and there where there was a specific part in mind.
okay. But on the other end, you got to come up with your own bits then, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like,
And working off of Stan, a lot of it is being driven from what or driven by what Stan is doing.
what is it? Well, that's what I think. That's what makes the Feelies rhythm section so encapsulating is that and like so as you're okay. So with those next few records, because like, is there a point where like some of the Wild Carnation like writing like because it's a big jump from well,
It,
I guess like
it is.
A couple more Feely questions I have before kind of leaving that topic.
You know, Wild. Oh, okay, sorry. Right, you had a few more Felix questions.
Yeah. So like okay, so stuff starts taking off. You guys you tour with Lou Reed and like
Mhm.
Lou Reed's notorious for not always enjoying his company, but he latches on to you guys and like what a inspiration of a writer to kind of be around. So like do you guys get to interact and like what are some kind of like I guess artist musician like inspiration lessons from even being around because I don't know if he was like a
Yeah.
talkative individual or he's just like you're on the tour, you're welcome. You know what I
Um,
mean? Like
yeah, we entered that with utmost respect of him.
yeah.
We're not the type of group that will um, be assertive. There's a biblical passage of sitting at the head of the table, and then you might be told, ask, why are you sitting here? Go to the other end of the table. But the person who sits at the far end of the table, the host will say, why are you sitting down there? Come sit next to me.
Mm.
So we were more of the, we'll just sit at the other end of the table. Um, and I, I mean, I don't know, personally what was going through his mind, but um, maybe we earned his respect because we respected him
Yeah.
and gave him his space. I remember being told, like, don't look him in the eye, like, just keep to yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were, um, just joking or whether that was the actual case. But I think, yeah, maybe he just saw, all right, this is the next generation, on that Velvet Underground family tree, the velvets are the trunk, and maybe he saw us as a branch coming off of that. But it does predate that. So it's kind of a long story, but to shorten it up, we were asked to play the Feelies were asked to play at a radio station. Sorry, I don't remember the station. It was out in Long Island, and they were having a um, sort of a celebration at a club, and the Feelies were asked to come and play a few songs. And Lou Reed ended up showing up and playing with us. So we did some Velvet
Yeah.
tunes. Now he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
It was kind of a almost like a dare, or it was just a, well, we'll play if Lou Reed plays. And then somehow the management got together. He thought it was a great idea, and then and there we were. Okay, we're not just, we're playing for this radio station event, and now we're playing like Sweet Jane and a couple other songs with Lou Reed himself. And, I
Yeah.
think we all almost passed out after that. And so he met us backstage, and, hello, I'm Lou, and hello, I'm Brenda.
Yeah.
It was so. I think I think he had or we had a connection to him. Well, okay, we definitely had a connection through that event, and it was just amazing that he came through with that. I mean, he could have thought it could have backfired. And so I think we were on in his radar, and he chose us to open for him. And actually, we were offered to open for him in Europe, which would have been amazing. Like, we were told after the fact that, like, if you had opened for him in Italy, you would be, because they worship him in Italy. You would have had it made, because all of Italy would be Feelies fans. But we weren't able to do it because we already had our own tour
Mm.
booked in Europe. So it's just amazing to have gone from the East Coast to the West Coast, opening up for him.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that's so cool.
Got some nice memorabilia. I was going through my
Yeah.
sorting my memorabilia, and just all the backstage passes, photo with him. He came on and played with us, which is just amazing. I mean, an opening act
Yeah.
Pete, when we opened for REM, Pete Buck would come out from time to time and play a song with the Feelies. But
That's
that's
sick.
almost unheard of.
Yeah.
The build up to the headliner, and the headliner, himself comes out and plays a song with us, was just amazing.
That's
And
so
that was
cool.
just so good of him to do that.
Yeah. And like was he like I mean was he mingling with you guys a little bit due to that or just musically? He did his bit and like you know what I mean like
we we socialized with him some. I
okay.
mean, we weren't party buddies or anything, but
Yeah.
I think he had a genuine interest, and would talk to us. He'd have a conversation. We just engage you in a conversation. You'd be maybe passing in the hallway, and you're thinking, all right, I'll just maybe just smile and walk past, give him his space, and he would reach out and start a conversation.
Was he like
So
talking writing music at all with you guys? Like or was it just like
um,
whatever? He was a
yeah,
Tai Chi.
just whatever an event might be, or kind of, small talk, or talk about music. It could really vary. And and um uh at one of the recent band practices, we were talking about, so we were invited to a party, but no one in the band remembers this party. So we're figuring, and I do have
Yeah.
like, I came across the invitation, and we were thinking, well, maybe we were invited but we couldn't go. um but he did reach out to us, and he had a conversation with, I believe it was with Dave, and he said, oh, you guys should come out to my house, and we can swim, swim in my pool. We never did it. But yeah, so
I saw that they put out a book. Lou Reed. It's like Lou Reed and Tai Chi. Like, was he? Apparently, he did that a lot on the road. Was that a thing? Like, you
oh,
guys
I don't
witnessed? Okay,
I don't know. I didn't witness that.
okay,
I mean, he probably would have done that in private in his
right.
own green
Um,
room.
but wow, what a way to be like recognized by the idols and as far as like people who made their own music scene and dived into it and like the just to be supported in that way. That's like in a way with it. artists like him, especially someone who's so reserved and so renowned in so many ways, like to get the kind of approval musically is like I don't know how you top that. Like,
Yeah, that
you
was
know,
definitely a highlight in our lives.
s- um
Yeah,
I guess the other Feelies question I had was Night of the Living Feelies.
right.
Whatever happened with that?
There wasn't the backing
Oh,
that was
okay.
needed. So Jonathan Demme wanted to do a documentary on the Feelies, and he wanted to call it the Night of the Living Feelies. And there's a little segment on MTV where when we were filming the Away video, Jonathan was interviewed, um, Glenn was interviewed. So it was like a little 5 minute thing on MTV back in the day. And Jonathan did mention, I'd like to put out a documentary on the Feelies called The Night of the Living Feelies. And if there are any backers out there, let me know. But so he did stop making sense. I guess you could say that he did stop making sense, rather than The Night of the Living Feelies, because there was more backing. And I think that would be accurate, or pretty accurate. So that was something that he wanted to do, and then it just never got off the ground. And then, obviously he went on to do a number of documentaries that, Talking Heads, Neil Young. Um, so
Yeah, films are like a whole nother like an album's like is an investment, but a film's like a whole nother
yeah,
yeah, like
right.
that's
And
another
and
monster of an investment.
right. And directors, they're the creative element, but they have to work with people who have money. And,
Right.
one person has the vision, one person has the money, and you're not always going to be told yes.
Right.
Uh,
And that's a whole nother art itself is how do you negotiate that? Like
mhm. Yeah. So the Away video um uh, is the Night of the Living Feelies, condensed to one song. So the
yeah.
movie was going to be people are kind of like zombies, and then the music brings them to life.
Ah, that
I
would
don't
be
know. I don't know
yeah,
what
that would
his
be sick.
whole vision
Yeah.
was, but that was the premise, and that's what happens in Away. We're playing. There's some people there. They're just kind of standing, and then the dance. So the dancing was supposed to get more and more, um, frenzied. And so if you watch the video, you'll see, yeah, people just kind of in place, and then they're tapping their feet, and then they're just, um, jumping around.
So it's almost kind of like a set, almost like a an
Yeah,
evening with.
exactly. Yeah, it goes back to that theme of
Yeah.
starting out mellow. You don't, I don't know that I want to be blasted, have music blasted at me as soon as I, um, and enter um, a venue.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, you got to work your way into it. So Wild Carnation is happen like the jump from one thing to the next, because like
mhm.
that Tricycle is such an amazing record and
Well,
like
thank you.
super bus too. Like I really enjoyed getting to dive down um, the rabbit holes
Mhm.
of each career and like so as that's a whole different type of writing though. Music
Yes.
and like
Yeah.
so that kind of is going back to the Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, singer songwriter roots with your guitar. So like
Yeah.
how did this
Right.
project come about and were these songs like kind of laying around during Feelies times or
So the Feelies, I mean, if the Feelies hadn't, I don't think we, officially called a breakup, but we did, yeah, we did disband in, July of '91. We played our last show at Maxwell's, and then that was it till the reunion in 2008. So, we just we just laid low for a couple months, and then it became obvious that we were not going to be coming back together as the Feelies. So I wasn't done with music. Stan moved on to Luna, so and Dave and Glenn formed Wake Ulu. So we all moved on with our own projects, and that's sort of a natural thing. It's not out of spite or anything. It's just sort of a practical thing. Like, okay, the Feelies aren't playing anymore, right? What do we do? Well, gee, I'd kind of like to write songs, and so everyone continues to move on, but just you just take a turn, and now you're moving in a different direction. So Rich Barnes, who a year after our first rehearsal became my husband, he was writing. So the material from Tricycle goes back to the early 80s. So this is before he was even listening to REM. He is and was a big REM fan. So the big difference between the Feelies and Wild Carnation is totally different songwriters. So there's the same bass player, different guitarist. It's one guitar, not two guitars. Chris O'Donovan actually studied under Stan Demesky, so there is a link there in the rhythm section. So yeah, it's kind of like another branch on a tree, but this one is going. There will be some elements that are similar, but then when you have a different songwriter, it's going to be different. And so, like you said, the Bob Dylan, Joan Baez aspect for me, this was something very new, like collaborating with someone. Rich was very good at just sitting down, playing the guitar, and just coming up with riffs and chords. That's not my strength. I just think of it as there are just too many chords to choose from. And so I did not write many songs on my own. I wrote some, but not many. My strength was more finding a melody within chords. So it was a perfect match, actually, because I wouldn't have the stress of trying to come up with chords, but I can hear someone else's foundation and build from that. And lyric-wise, some of the songs just sounded like something like, oh, this could be a song about a music box. This could be a song about childhood. And some of the songs some of the lyrics rose out of things that I'd written years before. I had, notebook with things jotted down. Some were complete, verses. Some were just ideas. For instance, if we move forward to the Superbus album, the song Bielefeld, Coffee's Slow, We've Got a Long, Long Way to Go. And that came out of just something I had jotted down about the coffee's very slow today or something like that. So that was something that I always wanted to use in a song. Or I would go through the book and just look for something that might go with, a new song, pulling different elements, and then sometimes having something that was pretty much formed.
It's like those little song seeds, those little scene setters, right? The coffee slow, like that builds up a whole that starts like a whole narrative, and if you have the canvas, the chords, and the melody there, it makes it so like now that line has purpose, and as like a
Right.
songwriter, it's like a different kind of headspace to be in because you're looking for those little song seeds, those little nuggets of like setting or story or narrative, whatever it is, is that was a there's a I can't remember the title of the song right now. There's one about a train that goes through New Jersey.
Oh, Susquehanna 142. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is. So that was the summer. That was around July 4th, the summer of 1992. So that's something that's written about a particular event. Although I expanded on it, like, okay, here's a steam train. Well, think about the history of steam trains, and what about the passenger? So it just kind of evoked something maybe more from the 1800s, steam rides, passenger rides in the 1800s. So in my mind, I saw, well, Victorian men, people dressed like the 1800s. Although this was a real train and still is a real train, it's now in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. But it was a steam train that was built in China, because China was the only country still making steam trains. And actually, the first train was shipped over to the United States, sunk in the Bay of Beijing. So they sent another train. Yeah, I looked up
That's
history, and I was just,
fascinating. Yeah.
whoa, this is wow. So they sent another train over, and so this steam train was going to be used for, um, excursions, just passenger rides. And I believe it was in New York State first, and then it started to move around the country. So at that time, I was living in Oakland, New Jersey, which is it's 2 towns away from Halden.
Okay.
So in the Halden area, but a little more rural. And so actually, it was Wild Carnation, or what would become Wild Carnation, people and some friends, and we were just having a gathering for the 4th of July, and you could hear the whistle. It was incredibly loud, and we heard the whistle, and then we just went running down to the center of town to watch the train. Oakland is a fairly mountainous area, not huge mountains, but it is in a valley, and so the sound of that train would just echo all over the place. It was really awesome, and we did take some. I do have a picture or two from that day. So yeah, it is it is the Susquehanna 142,
That's
and that
awesome.
track found
Yeah.
its way onto a train compilation
Yeah.
a few years back.
That's
Yeah.
like it's interesting because like that tricycle super bus, there's this kind of like a line of transportation theme throughout Wild
Yes.
Carnation. So
Yes.
is that something you guys are fascinated? It sounds like it. It
It
sounds like it.
it wasn't deliberate, but I think it is a natural thing to write about going somewhere
Mm.
or coming back home. But um, the tricycle idea came from, well, we were a trio, and a tricycle has 3 wheels,
Okay.
so that was inspiration um, for the tricycle theme. But the album is, it's a lot about childhood and childhood lost.
Mm.
The music box, like that's an actual music box that I had, and I thought it actually ends happy, unlike the song. I did find it; it was in the attic,
Yeah.
and it was intact, and it's actually I have it now in my room, so it won't get lost again. And it plays for release, Beethoven's
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
release. Yeah, so um, yeah, but you can have artistic license, and all right, well, if you don't want something to end happy, you can always change the ending a little bit. It can
Right.
resonate differently then.
Well, yeah. Well, for sure, and you can almost maybe more in certain ways. Um,
Hmm.
I guess Brenda, I really appreciate your time. I know we went over a little more
Okay.
than I thought we would. I guess other question, kind of on a different topic, was Food for Friends, the German group.
Oh, yeah.
How'd that come about? And like,
Oh, well, I was dating. So the Feelies toured in Europe many many times, and so I had a German boyfriend for, I'm not sure of the period of time, maybe a year or two, and so he and a friend were in a group, and so I was asked to um, put down parts for that.
Okay.
Wow, so how did you dig that up?
I do my
Not
research. I
not
do.
too many. Okay, yeah, my hat's off to you. Yes, you did your research.
Well, and
And there was also a group. So after the Feelies, whatever, um, stopped playing, I was working at Steve Fallon's store in Hoboken, called Handmade. So he was really kind in offering me a job because, I was now unemployed. And but it was really fun working there, and I met some really, really nice people. And one of them, she's living in New York City still, Patty Shaw. And so we met each other through Steve Fallon, and we started playing together. And she's a singer songwriter with a really, really good voice. So we were a duo, guitar and bass, and I sang backup vocals. And we played here and there, not too many shows. I would say that was maybe, well, that would have been under a year, and then we just kind of went our different ways. That was then Wild Carnation formed, so it was sort of, it was a mutual um, drifting.
yeah, was that kind of like a step for like getting because like coming like vocally kind of being up front? You know what I mean? Because that's another type of like the singing's so vulnerable in a way, and like as a bass player, it's hard. I have trouble backup singing and playing bass, but like as
Hmm.
guitar, it's a little different. Was that like kind of
Right.
maybe retrospectively like a kind of a comforting like step towards leading a group vocally?
I don't know. I didn't see it as a step. I was very happy to sing. Like what I enjoy most is singing harmony. I
Okay.
don't feel like a lead singer. I didn't grow up as a Taylor Swift or a Joan Baez. I would rather be the person who makes up harmony. That's just what fills my soul more.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of I when I joined the um, Chris and Rich, I'm not sure that I even knew I was going to be the lead singer when I came to that first rehearsal. There could have been like well, who's going to sing? And then, well, you, or something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, as much as I liked this new chapter of life writing songs, really, I just wasn't sure if I should be the one who would be singing them. So with Patty, it was very, yeah, it was very comfortable. Just, let her use her talented voice and writing skills, and I would just put my parts to hers. Um, so we do have a tape. We
Yeah.
should digitize it. Yeah, yeah,
Maybe so yeah, cuz kind of the process of the remaster for Tricycle, and there's a whole live concert on the back of it and all
yeah,
these like
yeah.
so like maybe it's like
That
a maybe digging for if you do redo Superbus that could be in there.
Well, actually, yes, Superbus is in the process of being
Yeah?
remastered and released on vinyl. That will be in the fall.
Very
So the
cool.
two projects were kind of, like it's been almost, well, it's been more than 2 decades of nothing really happening with the albums. Well, specifically Tricycle, and almost 2 decades with Superbus. And then suddenly, there were two record companies interested, and then the two, so Tricycle obviously is on Delmore. Superbus will be on Pine Hill
Hmm.
Records, which is um, based in New England. And the projects were kind of neck and neck. Um, and the connection to Pine Hill was that the owner came to a Feelies show at the Colony in Woodstock, and we have a merch table, and the Wild Carnation CDs are there for sale. And he bought both of them, and he was blown away. and really wanted to put them out. But we ended up going with Delmore, our original record company,
Mm.
for Tricycle, and so Superbus will be coming out on Pine Hill.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Are,
So, and we did like we wanted to space it out
yeah.
so that they wouldn't be competing against each other. It just didn't seem like the right thing to do. So if you'd like to talk about Superbus in the fall,
Yeah, let's
just
for
let me know.
sure. Yeah, let's definitely do it.
Yeah.
We'll dive in deep on that one. So also gonna have like the bonus stuff and concerts with it, or is it just a re-release of the record?
Not sure at this
Okay,
point.
okay.
But getting back to Tricycle, yeah, the show was we did a tour of Germany in 1997. So luckily the sound person put in a tape and recorded in Hamburg. Knust was a club in Hamburg. So I think, as far as we know, that's the only live recording from Germany. So that was remastered
Yeah.
because the recording was just way too much vocal. So it was remastered as much as could be done to draw the guitar out.
Right.
It's just what happens with a live line recording at a concert.
Yeah, the room's
But you
vocally
can
hot,
really,
but
yeah, and that's a little unnerving, but it's okay. I'm okay with it. Um, so it does sound better than the original tape that we had. Um, but the energy from that show is really, really cool. What I love is that you can feel and hear the energy. It's kind of like a Feelies show in that respect.
yeah.
Things get faster and faster, and yeah, just a lot of energy. And then there are also the demos. Before we went to Mixolydian Studios to record Tricycle, we had demoed everything on a home reel to reel, and I love the warmth of those demos, and I love the feel. There's just this really, really cool feel about the demos. Um, you know, I can't even say that they're raw because so much was worked out already,
Right.
and a lot of the songs Rich had written a decade before that, so they were pretty much, fleshed out before I mean, they were very fleshed out before we went into the actual studio.
I definitely like
I
listening
was
through. I definitely agree with that. And it's like it's there's there's some extra part like the trimmings was there on the studio cuts of it, but like yeah, like it was all there, and I guess sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah,
cut you off. Um,
yeah, yeah. So when we were listening to the demos, so we got our download code, and we were listening to everything now remastered and digitized as far as the bonus tracks.
yeah,
And I was listening, expecting to hear, like in the demos, expecting to hear, oh, it's good, like it could have been better, or that I might not like it
yeah.
a lot, or there might be something that I felt was, could have been better. And listening back, listening to it, I was really happy. Like I was really happy with it and felt very content with hearing those. So that was it was a great feeling to not be disappointed, but feel inspired, listening to the demos.
And well, that's like the kind of like we were onto something. You know what I mean? That's the success of a band of a song where you can listen to any of your recordings, especially the demos, and be like, I dig that.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
we were cool. Yeah, we were.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. It was okay. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we hope to start. Well, the pandemic really. We were Wild Carnation was supposed to play March 13th of 2020, and that was literally the day that everything
Yeah.
shut down in New Jersey. Um, our son, we had to go pick up instead of going to play a show in New Jersey on the 13th, we were picking up our son from college to bring him home because everything was shutting down.
Yeah.
So that was just an unbelievable time
Yeah.
of expecting one thing and then okay, there's going to be no show. So the last time we played would have been sometime in 20, well actually 2019. Um, and the summer, I think the summer of 2019 was the last time that we played. So we're trying to get shows going again and get out there and start playing again.
Is there anything on the books? Or is it
Right now, the only official thing is on April 29th, we're playing at Jack's Records in Red Bank, New Jersey. It's an acoustic set, about half an
okay?
hour long.
Very
Um,
cool.
yeah, we couldn't play on record day because the Feelies had these gigs,
Mm.
so we opted for the following weekend.
Oh, okay, that's right. This was
Yeah,
record store weekend. I forgot about that.
right. Yesterday was the official record store day. Yeah.
Did the
Uh,
Feelies have anything out for record store day?
Nothing special.
Okay,
No,
okay.
no, just oh yeah. But we did well. Actually, Newbury Comics in Boston. Well, maybe they're in Cambridge. I'm not sure. Well, the Boston area.
Yeah.
We signed a bunch of. So there was a special pressing of Crazy Rhythms and The Good Earth on a kind of a multicolored vinyl.
Yeah.
So they were selling those on Record Store Day, but those weren't just released on Record Store Day. They were from a little while back.
Okay, okay. Yeah, my bass player is gonna be mad at me because I usually run around for him on record store day, all the places he can't go. Alrighty.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks so much.
Well, thank you. You have a good one.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy.